Do your customers respect you? We're going to find out today with special guest Beate Chelette on today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Book Arbitrage Profits. If you want to start the ultimate side hustle, I can't recommend book flipping enough. Used books are continually going up in value. If you want to learn how to flip books and make 6 and even 7 figures, please join our free training at servetomaster.com/BAPS.
Are you tired of dealing with your boss? Do you feel underpaid and underappreciated? If you want to make it online, fire your boss and start living your retirement dreams now, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Serve No Master Podcast, where you'll learn how to open new revenue streams and make money while you sleep. Presented live from a tropical island in the South Pacific by best-selling author Jonathan Green. Now, here's your host.
I'm really excited by your topic where you help people to establish authority, because I think this is where so many people struggle. And it's sometimes the advice is fake it till you make it, or how do you get people to respect you? I've seen people that are absolute experts, but they're afraid to tell anyone. And other people, they're terrible, but they tell everyone they're an expert. And so they build these massive businesses. And we've seen a lot of businesses this year fail because someone was pretending to know what they were doing. Like we've seen these trading companies that lost $10 billion or $40 billion in trades all the way down to zero. I didn't even know that was possible. I thought you'd have something left, but they go negative. And this perception of expertise is where a lot of people get stuck. Often the wrong people seem like experts. So how can somebody, and this is what I'd love to know, is how did your journey start on the path to helping people establish and discover their authority?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. Like, how did that start to become the authority? I don't think anybody has ever quite asked me this question from this angle. I think that there was a point actually where I had just sold my company to Bill Gates, and I had closed a multi-million-dollar deal. And I am going in an interview with the industry journalist and the paper to talk about what I was going to do next in my consulting. And so I'm in this interview, and then he just stopped. And Jim said to me, "You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You already done that." And there was this moment, Jonathan, where I go like, wait, what? Am I still sounding like I'm justifying my right to be here even after I've done everything that everybody wants, built the business, sell it to, then the richest man in the world. And I'm still standing here and I'm still trying to justify why I have a right to be at the table. And that's when I started this authority piece, the authority platform building, and really looking into what is it that prohibits us from stepping into our authority, our expertise. And I literally just gave a talk to the national state senators about this very topic on how to own your authority. Even they have challenges with it.
Yeah, I wonder if it comes from the place that most people who have no authority in high school are the ones who are the biggest authorities later. So they're so used to being the nerd or the one who's getting picked on. Certainly that was me in high school, that you get stuck in that mindset of, or you're going, I don't want to seem pretentious. We're so worried about offending or seeming pretentious that we often undersell. And I'm reminded of the story. I met someone who was dating a friend of mine. I said, "What do you do?" He goes, "I'm a writer." I go, "What kind of books do you write?" He goes, "Oh, I don't write books." I go, "Oh, you write articles, magazines? What kind of thing do you write?" He goes, "No, I write music." And then I say, "Oh, what kind of music do you write?" He goes, "Oh, I actually write music for other people." And I'm like, "Well, what other people?" And it took me 8 questions to find out. And by question 8, I hated him. I was like,
yeah. And then you find out that they write music for like Beyonce, and you go, "Dude, are you an idiot to not tell me this?"
You're not far off. Like people I'd heard of, I was like, why did you bury the lead so much? Because that's what happens when you're like, "Oh, I don't want to seem like I'm bragging." Yeah, but you seem like you're hiding it. It makes me go, "Well, makes me think you must have done something horrible. Why is he hiding it?" And I find a lot of people, especially when they're doing a transition, like, "Oh, what do you do?" And they'll say their old job. And a lot of people say to me, "Jonathan, how do you get so many writing clients?" Well, I just tell everyone. That's all I do. I'm not really I don't do all this fancy marketing, all this fancy strategy. Everyone just says, "What do you do?" And I say, "Celebrity ghostwriter." 2 words, I say what I do, and that brings in so much business. And I find that a lot of people, they don't want to tell people their new thing until they're already succeeding at it. And that's, I think, the first place people get stuck. Well, I don't want to tell people I'm a ghostwriter until you have clients. How are you going to get clients if you don't know, if it's a secret what you do? So how do you help people to, first of all, realize that they are an authority and that it's okay to share that? Because I think maybe that's it. It's like this social fear of being like socially inappropriate. We're so afraid to be awkward that we would rather undersell ourselves.
Yes, you nailed it. I think there's a number of things that go into it. So number one, especially for women listening to your show, is that we are taught nice girls are being seen but not heard. It's impolite to brag. Let the work speak for itself. You don't have to do the talking. If you do a good job, someone somewhere at some point is going to see it, and that's where you get the rewards from. And then I interviewed a number of CEOs, and what they said to me, and I had written a white paper, and they said, listen, here's really what we want. We want somebody to walk in our office and sit down and say, hey, Jonathan, this is what I'm really good at. This is where I'm best put in the organization. This is what I can do. These are the things that I'm interested in. And this is why you're going to win when you put me in this position or give me that opportunity or whatever that is. So it's the opposite of what we are taught, that you think that you are the pearl in the oyster waiting for some random diver coming and finding you, or somehow someone is going to say, good job, Beate. That's never going to happen because they're so paranoid and freaked out about their own stuff and what other people think of them that they really don't pay attention to that. So we are in this perpetual waiting mode. It's almost like an infinity loop, Jonathan, if you think about it, right? You know, I'm going to do a really good job and then somebody's going to recognize that. And then, yeah, well, if that's not going to happen, I'm going to try to do a better job and someone's going to need to see that, but nobody doesn't. Oh, I'm going to do an even better job. So we are now in this relentless pursuit of perfection with one more degree, one more letter on our name, one more training course, one more coaching certificate, one more, because at some point, somebody's going to look at this and say, you've run out of letters to put behind your name. Now you're an authority. So here's the truth of it. The story goes that Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer of all times, became the greatest boxer of all times because he said he was the greatest boxer of all times. There was nobody that said you're the greatest boxer of all times. It was Muhammad Ali who went 2 inches in front of his opponent's face and he says, you know what? I'm going to beat you up. And you know why? Because I'm the greatest boxer of all times. And you should be afraid. You should be scared. You should go home. You should cry to your mama because you're going to lose so bad because I'm the greatest boxer of all times. And it stuck. And then it became a thing. So 2 things happen. Either you're going to call yourself something, like I'm the growth architect, and then you make that your tag that exudes the authority, or you apply for an award, or you are putting your PR out, and then somebody picks it up. So I'm one of 50 must-follow women by HuffPost. I am one of 10 most admired women in business. And I'm one of 10 most inspirational women, right? So I start getting these things as you go out further. Now, I don't have to say I'm so great because I have all these other people saying, here's Beate, she's one of these, and then they name these things. So authority comes from you recognizing that you have a right to talk about your subject matter expertise, period. Authority is not celebrity, and it's not going viral. Only cats go viral, and cute dogs, and people doing really stupid stuff. Talking heads don't tend to go viral. So you are an expert because it begins today where you say, yeah, I know my stuff. I'm good. I have a right to be here. People elected me. People have hired me. People paid me. I've gone to conferences. I've spoken. I've written a book. I've written white papers. I've been extensively out in the field. That makes you an expert, but you have to own that first.
Brought up something very interesting to me, which is you have to do your own PR at first. You have to tell people, because one thing I've learned is that if you don't tell people your nickname, they'll give you one. And I see this a lot when I work with authors and they choose a book title. And I go, if your book title is long, people will shorten it and you don't get to choose the shorten. And sometimes if you have a longer book, they'll shorten it and you won't like the result. It will end up something bad. I have some people like the first letter of the words of their book. I was like, that doesn't spell out something you want people to say if they shorten it to just the first letters. And it's the same thing. You have to really establish what you want people to call you. And if it's too long, or if it's like a really long expertise, like you have a tight growth architect, that's 2 words. I always say, try to get it to 3 words or less. Because if you give people a 10-word title, they're going to pick the 2 words they like and you won't know what they choose. So often people are afraid to say what they do or say what they're good at and you have to dig for it, which nobody wants to do. I love that story about what CEOs are looking, because that's what I look for. When I meet someone, I like, just tell me what the one thing you're good at. Like when I go to a conference and I'm meeting a lot of other entrepreneurs, I'm like, just tell me the one thing you're really good at and the one thing you're looking for. Those are the only two things I really want to know. And sometimes you're like, well, I don't, I'm kind of good at this. I'm kind of good at that. I'm like, no, don't make me dig for it. I don't want to dig. I just don't have time for it. And I think you're exactly right, because most people, we're all thinking about ourselves. I'm thinking about what's the best result for me. And if I have to spend 10 minutes to find out for you, or someone else will tell me in 3 seconds, that person's going to get more attention. And it's very interesting because I'm raising 2 daughters. So I was thinking a lot about what you said about how daughters are raised. And do you think that still happens a lot?
All the time. To this day, there's certain things that are still so common to be said to women. One of them being, you're so emotional, or that's a really emotional response, which is really the dumbest, most idiotic thing I have ever heard in my entire life. And I have for any woman who is on the call and has ever heard that, or even if a man is here and has heard that, all you do is you put your head back, you start out laughing, like literally you have to like laugh as is the funniest thing you've ever heard. And then all you say is good one. And you go right back to your stuff, because certain things don't need a response. But you have to also remember, Jonathan, that a lot of these interactions are designed to eliminate people that you don't need to focus on. So if you throw out bait and people take the bait and they're not interesting because they can't answer that question, you move on to the next person that's more interesting. So it's a natural selection process. So your being polite now suddenly becomes a detriment to you being noticed. And then you go into but I need to be heard, I need to be seen. So the best thing we can do for our daughters is to really make sure that's like, well, tell me what you think you're really good at. What do you love doing? Well, I really like writing. Well, that's fantastic. Now tell me, what are you not so good at? What do you not like? Well, I don't like math. What are you going to do about that? Why don't you just focus on being good enough in math to pass, and you focus on getting exquisite at writing? Because that's the part, remember, we have our educational system that has designed everything to take existing information, regurgitate existing information, and then you get an A. So then you go into an organization, or you're a freelancer, you go in business for yourself, and somebody says, what are you really good at? And then the teacher comes to mind that says, you suck at math. And then you already get really nervous because you say, well, I'm kind of a good writer. I mean, I'm not that I'm good at everything, but, and you're already done. So because nobody tells you that the stuff that you're really good at needs to be the hero, that needs to be front and center. So what I teach people in my authority piece is to say, so if somebody comes to you and says, well, what about these Excel pivot tables? Why are you not good at Microsoft Excel pivot tables? Just to pick an example that makes half of everybody cringing. And instead of making an apology, again, you just go like, why would I want to do that? Susie does that on my team. She's amazing. I'm going to hire somebody to do that. That's not what I've been hired for. Here's what I'm hired for. I'm hired because I can project management. I can bring people together. And I'm going to give you an example. So I did this training for Merck Pharmaceuticals. And we are going in the room, and then people, and I take them through the super skill exercise. And this one guy goes, I don't know what to say. It feels really awkward to me, but I had watched him. And I said, let me ask you this. I said, anytime you go into a room or in a meeting, what happens? He says, oh my God, I love people. They love me back. We have a great time. We laugh. I said, so would it be fair to say that every time you're in a room, you put people at ease, you're great at conflict resolution, you're a phenomenal motivator? And he goes, yeah. I said, that's it. I said, how important is it to have a skill like that when you are in an organization like that? And so you have to look at something, even if it's so trivial that you go, oh, doesn't everybody know how to do that? That typically is the super skill you need to focus on that becomes the hero.
So now you've gotten into something that I'm super interested in, because it's something I deal with a lot. I have 4 children, and none of them, I have the expectation that none of them will want to take over my business. I don't want to do what my dad did. He doesn't do what his dad did, or my mom did. Like people, we always think, oh, my kids want to take over. They never do. Kids want to do whatever we didn't do. And there are certain things like these expectations, like some of my kids are good at school and some aren't. And everyone's like, oh, why aren't you worried about the ones who aren't good at school? I'm like, you only have to be good at one thing. The one thing I've learned in the 42 years I've been around is that if you're really good at one thing, okay, one of my friends, two of his younger brothers are in a really, really, really big band that does concerts for 250,000 people. I was like, I don't know if he can do math. I don't even know if he can read, but it doesn't matter because he's really good at the guitar and the other one's really good at the drums. And you could be really good at art or really good at martial arts. Like, no one asks UFC fighters if they can do. I mean, I don't even know what an Expel pivot table is. I thought that. I'll just admit that right now. And no one
I
cares,
thought
right?
I saw you glazing over when I said that.
Oh, you lost me as soon as you said Excel. Like, literally, that's my poison. And like, I always have to Google how to delete duplicates whenever I'm working on a spreadsheet. Like, I have to look it up every time. But that's the thing, is that we're so taught, especially in Western education, that like, these are the skills you need. You need to be able to do all of these things. And I wish, instead of trigonometry, that I'd learned cooking or car repair or how credit cards
Balancing
work.
your
Like,
checkbooks, investing, buying homes, wealth, prosperity, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So important. I've never had a triangle-based emergency. I've never had to figure out how far, if I'm on a Ferris wheel and shoot a rocket, how far it will go, right? Like the stuff we learn in advanced trigonometry and all those college courses, none of it comes up. And there's this thought like, oh, my parents are the generation that the solution to poverty is college. But I don't believe that anymore. I believe it's entrepreneurship or inventing, or I see all these people, they just review toys and they make millions of dollars reviewing toys. Like, you can do anything, just be good at it. And there's this shift, at least in my mind, I think, to where a lot of the traditional education things they're so stuck in 100 or 200 years ago of the way people work or the way you need to do. Like you said, superstar employees, you can be a superstar employee if you're just really good at spreadsheets, or if you're just really good at getting the spreadsheet people to want to be there. And one thing that I've learned from studies I've read is that most promotions come from soft skills, not hard skills. Like a lot of people, you said, they work on getting these extra letters and they're really good at the hard skills, which is their job, but they're not good at making friends or networking. And as you get higher, you don't work with people you don't like. Like, you're at the level now, you would never work with someone you don't like. That's the whole point of being successful, is that I don't have to work with someone who's mean to me or who belittles me or makes me uncomfortable. But when I was an employee, yeah, I had to put up with a lot of that stuff or be with people I'm uncomfortable with or who were weird. And that's the beauty of like entrepreneurship and having your own business, is that you're like, oh, I don't work with anyone that makes me uncomfortable or that's weird around me or that says stuff I don't like. That there's freedom there. But a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm an employee, I just have to get better at my job. And then they never get the promotion because the person who talks the most, takes the most credit, even when they didn't really do it, that's the person who gets pushed up because of the soft skills. So a lot of people, I think it's the same idea of not wanting to like brag, or they just think, oh, I just want to be really good at my job. But that's how you get not noticed. I really want to hear the woman's perspective, because I don't know what it's like. So I don't know what it's like to be on the other side. So I want to have a lot of that, because a lot of my audience is ladies and I have no idea what that's like.
Well, most of the time it's like the entire business world has been set up on what I call an old business code. And if you think about it, that half of everybody who goes into an organization now is a woman and half of it is a man. But when we go in the upper ranks, now we're having 3% women CEOs comparatively. And the numbers are getting smaller as we go to the top. So now that would mean, if I'm logical, that would mean that women get dumber over time, whereas men get smarter, women get dumber. And then you look at that and you're like, that kind of can't really be, can it? So what is it that is at work here? Then people say, well, that's because women are having children and they're focusing on that. Then I say, oh, that must be an absolute surprise to most people that women have children, because why are we so unprepared for an environment where women happen to be the gender that is responsible for the bearing of the children? And every time it happens, everybody goes like, ooh, you're pregnant. Oh no, what are we going to do? This is what's going to happen to your career. What's going to happen to the job? It's like, we still haven't figured this out. Are you serious? After all this time, it's still like this mystery for people to figure this out. And then it derails. Then we make women feel guilty for wanting to have a career and not finding the gratification to be the stay-at-home moms. Then we have an economy that doesn't really allow most women to not work because they still have to bring in a second income. But then there is a priority to men working harder because women are traditionally more the caregivers. I mean, these are just all percentages. And there it goes. And that's why this discrepancy still exists. So I would say that you have to make a decision as a woman specifically, and to say, how hard am I going to want to work to make my priority happen? I was a single mom, Jonathan. I didn't have that luxury. So I had to, right? So I had to be the mom. I had to leave at 4:45. My daughter had to be picked up at 5:00. I had to make the money. I had to put the roof. There was no option, right? But it is very hard because there is nothing else but that. So it is a decision you make specifically as a woman. And that's the best thing you can do for your daughters, is to help them to navigate that early on and say, get clear on how important that is for you. Making an impact, to me, is everything. I mean, it's been like this. I've always known that there was a point in my life where I had achieved something that I would share. I've known this since I'm 16. And that is my mission in life. That's what gets me up. So it's a personal decision to say, what do you want? What are you in it for? What matters most to you? And that's where I come in, then you need a strategy to make that happen. And that strategy then includes authority building. And then you have to say, well, is authority for you jetting on a plane from speaking engagement to speaking engagement? Is that your authority? Hint, very exhausting. Or, yeah, for anybody who can see Jonathan's face, he just made like a cringe face. You know, it's like, how do you, right? It's like crazy. It's like hotels and airplanes and bad food. Or are we building your authority based on what you are doing, Jonathan? You're a podcast host. I suppose you probably a podcast guest on other podcasts as well. And you do PR marketing. You know, you are on different platforms so that people can find you. So you building your authority based upon what works for you, because in your studio, you don't have to leave the house and you get people to listen to what you have to say. So it's being deliberate about what authority is and what you're willing to do for it.
Yeah, you get me. Exactly right. Because I did the speaking thing for a while where I was traveling like for 100 days out of the year and I go, this is horrible. So there's something I like to talk about a lot, is that everyone's definition of success is different. Some people's definition of success is they got it, get that B. They want to make $1 billion. Other people, for me, like I have a ratio of money to freedom. For example, this afternoon, I was planning on working on some stuff for a new project. And my wife was like, let's take the kids to the beach. And I said, okay. I didn't get anywhere. I got a little bit of work done, but not really, because where we went, the internet wasn't that good. But to me, that's a better use of the day, but that's a decision I made. And you're exactly right. I think a lot of people, when we wait to make a decision till the last moment, we tend to make bad decisions. Like I decided in advance exactly the type of situation I wanted between me and my wife, what we wanted as far as how we raise our kids. Just to me, the time, I don't think at the end of my life, I'll be like, oh, I wish I'd spent more time at work. I would always be like, I wish I spent more time with the kids. I don't want to miss any moments. I'm the one who is there for their first words, the first steps, the first potty training. My wife is home less than me because she's out running errands all the time. So I'm more home, more caregiver. Kids still love her more, of course, but that's very interesting to me because a lot of times we don't make an active decision. And then exactly like you said, you get pregnant, like, well, what do I want? It's like, you have to think of that beforehand because it's very hard in the moment to make a decision because it's suddenly like, well, now you don't have time to think about it. And I think that's really, really good advice. And especially the part about you can choose your path and choose the authority. You're exactly right. I built an entire life, an entire strategy. My wife and I sat down maybe 8 or 9 years ago and said, we wanted to live on an island. And we do now. We lived on different, and that island used to have the internet cut out for 5 or 6 days at a time. And so I said, how can we make a business where even if the internet cuts out, the work continues, the revenue continues coming in? It took us 2 years to build that strategy, but it was very, very intentional. Like I didn't just happen to move to a tropical island and like luck out. It took 2 years from planning to execution, and still I work all the time. But I think this is very, very helpful because a lot of people don't know what they want and they think there's only one definition of authority. I see this all the time.
Yeah, it's not the Gary Vee definition.
Well, if your definition of success is if your rich parents give you millions of dollars to start a business, well then yeah, like that's the shortcut. And I get that. I wish I'd had that too. Like I wish my parents gave me a multi-million-dollar business to start from, but I think a lot of people get caught up in that hype I think you have to self-define what do you want, because growing up, I went to high school in Tennessee, and there's a Southern thing, and the definition of success was like white picket fence, this type of house, 2 cars, kids go to the school. I was like, I don't want any of those things. Like the entire list of things I don't want. I don't own a tie, or I actually don't think I own even any pants anymore because they melted. It's so hot here. I had all my winter clothes in the attic and it melted into a cube. But that was like very, very intentional. Like I went in and said, these are the things I want and things I don't. So I met a lot of people in my industry that were making a lot more money than me. And I was like, none of these guys look happy. But it's really important is everyone's definition of happiness is different. And I feel like sometimes we're afraid to say what makes us happy because we think everyone else is thinking something different. So I think what you're saying is so powerful, especially for ladies, because I was also thinking like, I do wish we had an economy where you didn't have to work, where it could be much more of a choice, whether you want to or not. Like, man, I think being a stay-at-home dad would be such a cool job. I love hanging out with my kids. Whenever I stay-at-home dad, I'm jealous. I'm like, oh my gosh, all you do is hang out with the kids. That's my dream job. So we do have this, we've created this economy that does almost every family needs 2 incomes to stay ahead. I think that kind of stinks, to be honest with you. I think that it forces people to do things they don't want to do, or families in these different situations just to stay even. I think it's too bad, whether it's the man or woman that stays at home. So I think that a lot of what you're saying is very helpful to people, and that there are a lot of ways to establish authority. And it's so interesting. Like I learned it from someone who was a dentist, and he started submitting press releases that said he was a celebrity dentist, and he would have people take pictures of him and send them into tabloids until they started publishing them.
Does he by any chance live in Los Angeles?
No, this is in London. This is in London about 10 years ago.
Because I know somebody who's done it here too. Yeah. And then wrote a best-selling book being a celebrity dentist. And you go like, how the heck did you even do that?
Well, that's why all these people now are like, I'm a celebrity chef. And I'm like, well, I've never heard of you. I couldn't name any celebrity chefs. But there's this thing where you create your essence and you just choose what you want to be known for. I think that's the first thing. I think people are afraid to pick one expertise. Like, what if I change my mind? And that's the first part. And then being willing to tell people and then executing on it. Because you mentioned earlier being a pearl that people find. It's not going to happen. Very few people. I think that like we all hear the story of some model or movie star that someone saw in a mall and discovered them and now they're like famous. That doesn't really happen that often, right? Like I always think about someone who's an overnight success. And it's always like, well, if you don't count the first 20 years of their life, I guess so. You don't count like the first, like they'll be like, this band is an overnight success. And I'm like, that's their 6th album. Like they've been doing this for 14 years before they got famous. But we always say we want it to be an overnight success. But I don't think that exists in any industry, that there is the effort that people don't notice. Like people say to me, wow, Jonathan, you're such an overnight success. I'm like, I lived in my mom's basement for a year and on my friend's couch for a year and a half after that. Nobody would have said, wow, that guy's a real success living on his friend's couch in a studio apartment. But they delete that, right? Like they delete the first half of your life in order to create this narrative, this exciting story that you came from nothing. And it's like, no, there's an element of hard work in every success story, right? So I think this is really helpful. But can you tell me more about the different types of authority so people can think about, oh, which type of authority do I want to create? I love that.
Yeah. So there obviously is the authority that everybody knows, that becomes like a subject matter expert on like a Brené Brown, or, to stay with Gary Vee, even though I'm not entirely sure what Gary Vee is the authority on, other than he's the authority on Gary Vee, but that's just a side note here. Or like a Tony Robbins, who has done everything and worked tirelessly to get to the top of the game in this one thing, in personal development, right? Tony Robbins is very much responsible for what personal development is today. And the man, I think it's a $6 billion company the man runs. This is not small pocket change. So you can go for the top. Now you have to remember, when you do that, you need money, you need time, and you need a huge team. And you are going to give up your life as you know it, because then everything you do has to be to maintain that machine that is that brand, right? So when you watch a documentary on Tony Robbins, I think it's called I'm Not Your Guru on Netflix, which is very powerful. You see how dedicated he is, and you see all the things he does to keep that machine, his body and his brain, going so he can do what he does, and the discipline he has. So that's number one. Authority number two is an industry expert authority. So where, I'm a business growth expert, which is why I'm the growth architect. I do the things other people don't like doing. I do the strategies, building the systems. mapping out the methods. Other people talk about the dream and all the things. I'm the one behind the scenes that put things together. That's just my jam. So I'm an expert in that category. So when you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on other programs, and now you need somebody to come in and help you figure out how these even all connect and what the business model is, you come to me, I'll help you build the strategy so you even know what you can use and what you shouldn't be using. Then there is a authority within an organization where you are utilizing, it's kind of like an octopus strategy, where you expand your network vertically within your organization to be recognized as somebody who has knowledge about this particular business and how this particular business or this industry works. That's when you ask to be submitted for speaking engagement as industry conferences to elevate your reach, which anyone on listening to this call, if you are still in employment at an organization, that's where I definitely would start. I would work on a couple of speaking topics that you're knowledgeable about, and then start submitting yourself to conferences and then saying, hey, I've been accepted for a speaking slot at the AI seminar in Orlando. I want to represent the company and talk about the great things that we do. Can I go? That gets you started on expert and industry status. So that's really the three main ones. And you're just going to have to make a decision which one it is going to be for you.
I think it's very interesting. A lot of people, they think if they have a job, they're passive about it, right? Like I always know someone's been fired when I start seeing them update their LinkedIn profile or update their resume. They never do it in advance. And we never think about what are things I can add to my resume that will make me, more hireable, more likely to get a promotion or a raise. That's why I work with so many people to write their book, because it makes a difference. You say, oh, I'm a best-selling author. It's another way to establish your authority. Like there's all these things you can do, but oftentimes we think, oh, entrepreneurs and employees are so different, but they don't have to be. It's totally fine to be an employee. There's a lot of things you can do, move between companies and jump up. It's one of the best ways to get a promotion is to apply at other companies. But a lot of people, like I said, soft skills and hard skills, they focus on the technique of their job and not the cultivation. And that's why some people rise to the top, right? They approach it like entrepreneurship. They will go, I want to move to the top. I do want to circle back because you talked about what it takes, the first type where you want to be the top peak of your industry, working all the time, Tony Robbins and things like that. And I always think about these people who make billions of dollars and they set these records for how much money they make. And then they always set their records for the biggest divorce or the biggest loss in a single year, right? And I'm always like, well, I see, and always you see oh, I have kids, but my kids hate me so much they changed their name. That's my worst nightmare. And I think it's so important to, when you're choosing who you want to be like their entire life, because whoever you follow, a lot of people follow oh, I want to be just like Warren Buffett. Do you want his life? What? I don't know about his marriage. I don't know about where he lives. I don't know anything about him except for he's famous for trading. I'm well, there's a lot more to it, because whoever you model, you'll end up like them. Do you want to be the person who's had 5 divorces and their kids hate them? Okay, but just know that's the price. As you talked about, when you do all of those things, and I've had those conversations with my family about what we're going to do in our strategy. That's why I don't do speaking engagements anymore. I don't travel very much, because of the ratio of what I want and the future of my life and what happened with my parents raising me. And I think that it's really important to go, I really want that, because a lot of people think they want it. It's like the American dream, right? You think I want this. You go to high school, college, graduate school, get the job. And no, you can be happy when you're this. You can be happy when that. And you get to 65 and you're like, wait, when do I get to be happy? Because you didn't plan it in advance. You let other people tell you. So I think this has been really powerful. I think this will help a lot of people to approach their business or their lives or their careers a little bit more strategically. Because a lot of people would never consider trying to speak at a conference unless they're invited. I bet a lot of people heard that and go, I thought you have to be invited to speak at a conference. I didn't know you could submit. It's these small things. And it's well, just look, because there are so many conferences desperate for speakers. They might not pay you the first time, right? But at least they're just get you on stage, you get that practice. And it is a great way to establish that I'm the best person at this. I'm reminded of, I one time applied for a job and they had me take a psych test. And one of the questions was, would you rather be renowned for your skills with a copy machine or for paperwork? And I thought to myself, if I was renowned for either of those things, I would be so depressed. Because renowned is a big word. Oh, that's the best. He's the best photocopier I've ever seen. That's what people be saying. I walk into the room. I don't want to be renowned for that. And it's really important to go, what do you want to be renowned for? Because that's your authority.
You're absolutely correct. And that's a really funny example. It's sometimes I look at these things, and don't be afraid if it's ridiculous to say, this is actually ridiculous. I can't even answer that. I mean, somebody would ask that question. What kind of question is that? But you hit point. It is a decision you make. And life is not a series of coincidences that somehow, where you bumble around and then like a pinball, and then sometimes gets a little bit more points, sometimes fewer points, but at the end, it's always game over. So you have to figure out what a journey is that excites you, how much you are willing to do for it. And then you find a business model, because these models already exist, right? I have a woman I spoke to who's designed a new bra for women. And she goes like, well, I don't know what to do. I said, your model is the Spanx model. The model already exists. Study everything she did, Mrs. Blake did, and then copy that. You don't have to reinvent this. The information is already out there. Just figure out what you like, find somebody who's done that, and then learn the model and then become it.
I think that's really great. I think that people are really going to enjoy this episode. And I know they want to see more about what you do and hear more from you. Where's the best place for people to find you online, to see more of the things you do and see maybe if they're a good fit for working with you?
Absolutely. So go to beatechelette.com, which will be in the show notes. And you can join our monthly masterclasses at yourbusinessmc.com. They're free. Every month I do a 2-hour masterclass on topics like authority platform building and signature systems, like anything that helps people with strategy and systems. Or you can reach out on LinkedIn or any other social media platform, say hello. While we're at it, will you please go to wherever you're listening to this podcast to and give Jonathan a 5-star review and share this with one other person that needs to hear what we talked about today.
Thank you so much. I really love it. I always love reviews, and 5 stars are my favorite kind. So thank you so much for being here. I know people are going to really love this episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan.
Thank you for listening to the Serve No Master podcast. Make sure to subscribe so that together we can achieve true freedom.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Serve No Master podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next week with more tips and tactics on how to escape the rat race. Please take a moment to leave a review at servenomaster.com/iTunes. It helps the show grow, and more listeners means more content for you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.